I recently received a question from Azul4904. I think I got that right. And they asked how to quickly identify intervals. And I think it's a good question. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. If you're interested in understanding what you're looking at on the score, one thing that's really important to be able to deal with quickly is what interval are you looking at. This is going to help you identify a number of different musical elements, anything from like what the key is to what the chord is, or just a number of different things, inversions of chords, etc., etc. So understanding intervals and being able to label them quickly is important, and it's a useful thing to be able to do. First thing you want to do is just understand that the physical distance on the staff is going to help you quickly identify intervals. So if we start here on the bottom line, that's an E, right? And the next note would be F. Okay, E up to F is always going to be some kind of second. All right, so if E is 1, we label the lower note as 1, then the next letter name up is going to be a second. So E to F is a second. If they were stacked together, they would look like this, right next to each other. Now, this example here, some people get a little confused because it looks like the notes are offset. The only reason it's written this way when you've got really close notes, when you have the interval of a second, is because if you stack the notes like you normally would, you would get this kind of weird cluster where the notes collide with one another. So they're always offset like that. So that's a second. And then a third would be here, E up to G. A fourth would be E up to A. A fifth would be E up to B, etc. And you can see how the physical distance between the notes is changing as you go. So this is really helpful. If you can really quickly identify, okay, like in the example of the third here, E up to G there, that's a third. Or if I was here, C up to E, that's also a third. So you see in this example here, you go C up to E and you go note on the space up to the next note on the space. That's always a third, okay? Now, whether it's a major, minor, augmented, or diminished third, that's a different thing, but you know right away that that's a third just from looking at the page. This one here, it's also a third, okay? Let me erase this real quick. And so getting used to the spacing between the notes on the staff to help you identify intervals is really helpful. So, for example, here's an A, and if I want a fifth above A, I just go like this. That's the physical distance on the page for what a fifth looks like. So here would be another fifth, okay? Or here's another fifth, okay? So it's that far apart. You can see how that works, okay? And sixth or a little bit wider, sevenths, octaves, etc. And so if you can get quick at identifying the distance, that can be really helpful. Now, as far as knowing the quality of the interval, that's a different thing. That gets into understanding like half steps, distances between notes, right? And this can get tricky, right? So sometimes in my videos, I'm saying, oh, this is the interval of a major sixth, and how many half steps is that? Well, it's a total of 9 half steps, and you might be thinking, man, I got to count 9 half steps to figure out the interval. Maybe initially you do, but it doesn't always have to be this way. So, for example, I think good intervals to know the number of half steps would be thirds. Fourths are probably useful. Fifths. Okay, perfect fourths and perfect fifths, major and minor thirds. So in the case of thirds, major thirds are 4 half steps, minor thirds are 3 half steps. Perfect fourths are 5 half steps, and perfect fifths are 7 half steps. So if you get good at identifying perfect fifths, perfect fourths, major and minor thirds, that's going to help you out a ton, okay? And so for example here, if I had these two notes, okay, we've got a G going up to a B, I know right away just from looking at this that that's a third. What kind of third is it? Well, here you can count the half steps, and there are actually 4 half steps from G up to B. So this would be a major third, so big M3, okay? Now, at first, you might have to count the half steps, but hopefully over time, you get pretty good at just knowing, just from rote memorization, G up to B, that's a major third, okay? If I want to make it a minor third, I would make it a B flat, and that would be then 3 half steps. In the case of the fifths, let's do this one here, I've got C up to G. That is a perfect fifth. It is a total of 7 half steps. And at first, you might have to count the half steps. And then once you recognize, okay, C up to G, that's a perfect fifth. It's always a perfect fifth. You lock that away. Every time you have a C going up to a G, that's a perfect fifth. Every time you have a C going up to an F, another perfect fifth. Every time you have a B going up to a F sharp, that's a perfect fifth. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, like this one, B up to F, that is a fifth, and you can see just the distance between the notes on the staff, that tells you it's a fifth. But to make this particular interval a perfect fifth, what you have to do is you have to count up 7 half steps, and you have to end up labeling the F as an F sharp. So B up to F sharp is a perfect fifth, all right? So I hope that's useful. Intervals are really important because really our scales, all of the chords that we deal with, ultimately they're based on just these, I don't know, rudimentary is the right word, but maybe like fundamental interval, right? We need to know our thirds. We need to know our fourths, our fifths, etc. And then with the larger intervals, like let's say you're dealing with sevenths. Well, if you think of the octave is going to be a total of 12 half steps, and the octave is pretty easy to understand, right? You start on the lower note and you go up to the next note of the same letter name, E up to E. That's an octave, right? Well, to make it a seventh, you just drop it down, either a half step or a whole step, depending on the type of seventh, right? So E up to E is an octave, but E up to D sharp, that is a major seventh. E up to D natural would be a minor seventh. And then you could figure out the half steps too, but that's really how you want to go about it. Take your perfect intervals, fourths, fifths, octaves, use those as a basis, and then also play around a lot with your thirds, because thirds, really, that's how the chords are built, right? It's tertian harmony. We're stacking thirds all of the time. So knowing your thirds is helpful too. I hope that all makes sense. Feel free to leave me a comment, question, and I will see you guys in the next video.